She knocked on the wrong door, asking for help, but the man inside was the reclusive billionaire who saved her life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The night rain fell hard over the quiet suburban street, tapping against windows and echoing off empty driveways. Lena Hart's hands trembled as she pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body, her breath coming out in small white clouds. The cab had dropped her off 2 blocks away, but the address she was looking for seemed to vanish in the storm. Her phone was dead, her shoes soaked, and every porch light looked the same through the curtain of rain. "Please, just one person awake," she whispered. A flash of lightning split the sky as she spotted a faint glow from a house at the end of the street, a large one, its windows warm against the darkness. Desperate, she ran through puddles and up the steps, pounding on the heavy oak door. "Hello? Please, I just need to use a phone." The door creaked open. A tall man stood in the doorway, his frame backlit by the amber light inside. His face was striking handsome but weary, shadows under his eyes, silver at his temples. He looked like someone who had not spoken to another soul in days. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "I am sorry," Lena stammered, her voice shaking. "I got lost. My phone died. I just need to make a call. I will go right after, I swear." For a long moment he did not move. Then with a sigh he stepped aside. "Come in. You will freeze out there." The warmth of the house hit her like a wave. It smelled faintly of cedar and rain, the kind of place that felt untouched by time. Lena hesitated at the doorway, dripping water onto the marble floor. "Thank you, really. I just—" "Sit," he interrupted gently, nodding toward a couch near the fire. He disappeared for a moment, returning with a towel and a mug of something steaming. She wrapped the towel around her shoulders, shivering less. "I am Lena," she said, trying to smile. "You are very kind. I must have knocked on the wrong door." The man looked at her, something flickering in his dark eyes. "You could say that," he murmured. "Elias Crane," he added after a pause. "I live alone. Not many people find their way here." His voice was calm, deep, the kind that made every word feel deliberate. Lena glanced around. The room was grand but empty. Walls lined with books, and canvases, turned backward, as if hiding secrets. "Are you an artist?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Not anymore." The clock ticked between them, the storm still roaring outside. She took a careful sip from the mug-hot cocoa, perfectly sweet. It had been years since someone had made her anything warm. For the first time that night, her chest loosened. She looked at him again, really looked, and thought she saw something familiar, something from a memory blurred by shock and flashing lights. But before she could place it, he spoke again. "You can use the phone in the study," he said. "Down the hall, second door." She nodded, rising slowly, clutching her sketchbook close to her chest so the damp pages would not tear. As she walked away, Elias's gaze followed her, his jaw tightening. On her sketchbook's cover, barely visible through the rain stains, were the faint words, "For the man who saved my life." And though Lena did not know it yet, the man standing in that quiet house was the very one she had been searching for ever since that night under the bridge a year ago. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the study, painting golden rectangles on the polished floor. Lena woke up on the couch wrapped in a soft blanket she did not remember taking. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed it all, the rain, the stranger, the house that smelled like cedar and quiet. Then she saw the mug on the coffee table, half full of cold cocoa, and reality returned. She sat up quickly, brushing her hair from her face, embarrassed at the thought of falling asleep in a stranger's home. The house was silent except for the distant crackle of the fireplace. A note lay beside the mug, written in clean, measured handwriting. "Breakfast is in the kitchen. The phone is by the window." Signed with 2 initials, E.C. She smiled faintly. He had made breakfast for her? She followed the smell of toast and coffee, stepping carefully on the marble floor. The kitchen looked like something out of a magazine, all stainless steel and sunlight. But there was a plate waiting for her, a simple omelet, toast, and a glass of orange juice. She ate slowly, feeling warmth return to her limbs. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where acres of quiet forest stretched behind the mansion. It was beautiful, but lonely. "Good morning," came a voice from the doorway. Lena turned, startled. Elias stood there in a black sweater, hair slightly messy, eyes calm but guarded. "I hope the storm did not keep you up," he said. "I slept better than I expected," Lena admitted. "Thank you for letting me stay. I will be out of your way soon." He nodded once. "No rush. The roads are still flooded. The phone is in there." He gestured toward a small study adjoining the hall. She called her friend, explaining what had happened, and promised she would return to the city that evening. When she hung up, Elias was still there, leaning against the doorway, watching her quietly. "Do you paint?" he asked suddenly. Lena blinked, surprised. "Sometimes." "How did you—" "Your sketchbook," he said. "You were holding it like something precious." She laughed softly. "It is just old drawings. Nothing special." "Nothing special usually means everything," he murmured. She hesitated, then opened the sketchbook. The pages were wrinkled from rain, but the pencil lines were still sharp portraits, city streets, small moments of light. Elias studied them silently, his expression unreadable. "You have an eye for truth," he said at last, "the kind most people avoid." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I draw what I see." "That is rare," he replied, almost to himself. The moment lingered between them until her stomach growled, breaking the silence. He smiled for the first time, a brief, human smile that softened his entire face. "I suppose I should drive you back once the road's clear," he said. "Unless you plan to draw my house as payment for the cocoa." She laughed, relaxing a little. "Deal." They spent the rest of the morning clearing leaves from the porch and talking in fragments. He told her about the forest, the deer that wandered close at dusk, and the studio upstairs he had not entered in years. When she asked why, he only said, "Some rooms hold memories better left alone." The rain stopped by noon. As Lena gathered her things, she hesitated at the door. "Thank you again, Mr. Crane. You did not have to help me." "Most people would have walked past," he said quietly. "You knocked." His gaze lingered on the sketchbook tucked under her arm. "Keep drawing, Lena." She nodded, smiling, not realizing that his words would echo in her mind for weeks. As the cab carried her away down the long, winding road, she looked back at the mansion once more. Elias Crane stood at the window, watching her go, the faint reflection of the storm still in his eyes. He lifted his hand as if to wave, but stopped halfway, the gesture falling short. Alone again, he turned from the window, the house swallowing him in silence. On the table near the fireplace, where she had sat the night before, lay a small torn page from her sketchbook. On it was a quick pencil sketch of a man standing in a doorway, rain pouring behind him, with a single line written underneath, "The man who saved me." Elias stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before setting it gently beside the cold mug of cocoa. Days turned into weeks, but Lena could not stop thinking about the quiet man in the mansion. She tried to focus on her shifts at the cafe downtown, but each time the rain hit the windows, she remembered the warmth of his voice, the calm way he had said, "You knocked." One evening after work, she sat at her small desk in her rented room, sketching without thinking. The lines that formed on the paper were familiar, a man standing at a window, light falling across his face. She sighed, shaking her head. "Get a grip, Lena," she whispered. Still, something about him lingered, his eyes, full of stories he never told. A few days later, she was walking home when a newspaper headline at the corner stand caught her attention. "Tech visionary Elias Crane donates millions to rebuild local community center." She froze, staring at the photograph. There he was, dressed in a suit, standing beside city officials. The same man who had handed her cocoa and a towel, the same man she had thought was a recluse. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered. The customers at the cafe had mentioned the Crane Foundation before, but she had never connected the name. She felt a strange mix of shock and disappointment. Why had he not told her who he was? That night, she looked through her sketchbook again. The drawing of the man at the window seemed almost mocking now. She closed the cover and set it aside, but sleep never came. A week passed before she saw him again. It was at a small art fair downtown, where local painters displayed their work. She had been invited to sketch portraits for tips, and though the day had been long, she smiled through it, enjoying the hum of laughter and music. Near the end of the evening, a shadow fell across her table. "Still drawing what you see?" a deep voice asked. Her hand stilled. She looked up, heart skipping. Elias stood there, no longer in black sweaters, but in a charcoal suit that made him look even taller, more distant. "Mr. Crane," she said softly. Or should I say, the Elias Crane. He looked uncomfortable. "So you saw the papers." "It was kind of hard to miss," she said, closing her sketchbook. You let me think you were just someone ordinary. I am not sure that being rich makes me extraordinary, he replied evenly. She frowned. That is not what I meant. You lied by omission. I wanted to be treated like a person, not a headline, he said quietly. The noise of the fair faded around them as they stood in silence. Lena finally looked away. You did not need to hide. You just needed to be honest. She started packing her pencils, her throat tight. Lena, he said, reaching out, then stopping himself. I did not mean to deceive you. I only wanted to remember what it felt like to meet someone without expectations. She shook her head. And now you have ruined it. With that, she turned and walked away into the crowd, leaving him standing under the string lights, her sketch of him still on the table. That night, back in her apartment, Lena stared at her phone. A part of her wanted to delete his number, but she never had it to begin with. The storm outside returned, rain drumming against the glass. Somewhere across the city, Elias stood in his empty mansion again, her sketch lying on the table where he had left it. The fire had burned down to embers, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of his own loneliness. He picked up the drawing, tracing the lines of his own face with his thumb. You knocked on the wrong door, he murmured, but maybe it was the only door I ever wanted to open. The next morning, Lena found an envelope slid under her apartment door. Inside was a simple note written in the same clean handwriting she remembered. There is something I would like you to see. Saturday at noon. The Crane Gallery. She stared at the message, her heart pounding. She had never heard of that place before, but somehow she knew it was connected to him. She set the note down beside her sketchbook and whispered, "What are you planning, Elias?" The city outside was waking up, unaware that two lives were slowly, inevitably, finding their way back toward the same door. Saturday came with a clear blue sky, the kind that made the city look cleaner, softer. Lena stood across the street from the Crane Gallery, clutching the note that had brought her there. The building was modern and quiet, its glass facade reflecting sunlight like water. She hesitated before stepping inside. The air smelled faintly of paint and new beginnings. A receptionist smiled. "Welcome, Miss Hart. Mr. Crane is expecting you." Lena's heart skipped. She followed the echo of her own footsteps through a long corridor lined with framed sketches. At first, she thought they were just ordinary works portraits of strangers, city streets, but then she froze. One of the drawings was hers. The next one, too. Her style, her signature, even the way she shaded the corners. Dozens of her sketches hung on the walls, perfectly framed, perfectly lit. At the end of the hall, a large painting stood on an easel beneath a spotlight. It was her latest piece, the one she had been working on before the storm, unfinished and left on her desk. Only now it was complete. The man at the window looked out over a world washed clean by rain. "Elias," she whispered. His voice came from behind her. "You left the sketch." I could not ignore it. She turned to see him standing there, dressed simply, no suit, no distance. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A thank you," he said. "And a beginning. You said you wanted to open a space for art, a place for people like you. So, I built it. The Crane Gallery belongs to you as much as it does to me." She shook her head in disbelief. "You cannot just give me a gallery." "I am not giving you anything," he said softly. "I am investing in something I believe in." She stared at him, speechless. "Why me?" His answer was simple. "Because when everyone else saw a mistake, you saw a door worth knocking on." Emotion swelled in her chest, a mix of gratitude and fear. "You should have told me sooner," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought honesty was what you wanted." "It is," he admitted, "but I was afraid if I told you who I was, you would not have seen me anymore." She took a shaky breath. "And what do you see when you look at me?" "Someone who reminded me what it means to live," he said. "Someone who made me wish I had not spent so many years behind locked doors." The silence between them was heavy but warm. Lena turned back to the paintings, her fingers brushing over the frame of one. "This is too much," she murmured. "It is not enough," he replied. "You saved me too, Lena. You just do not know it yet." Before she could answer, the sound of soft footsteps drew her attention. Reporters had begun to enter, cameras flashing. The gallery was opening to the public. Elias leaned closer. "Let them see what real art looks like." He stepped forward, introducing her as the featured artist. Applause filled the space, and Lena felt lightheaded, overwhelmed but proud. When the crowd drifted toward the refreshments, Elias returned to her side. "There is one more piece," he said quietly. He led her to a small corner room. Inside, under soft light, hung a single framed drawing, her old sketch from that rainy night. "The man who saved me," it read at the bottom. Tears blurred her vision. You kept it? It kept me, he said. She turned to him, every word caught in her throat. Elias. He smiled gently. You knocked on the wrong door, Lena, but you opened something in me I thought was gone forever. She did not know if it was the light or the quiet between them, but in that moment the world outside the gallery faded away. For the first time she reached out and took his hand. It was steady and warm. The applause outside rose again, echoing through the halls like a heartbeat. Standing there amid the art that had once been only sketches and dreams, Lena realized that every wrong turn, every storm had led her exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks that followed were a blur of color, laughter, and second chances. The Crane Gallery became more than a building. It became a pulse of life in the city. Every day, children from nearby schools filled the halls with noise and wonder, their hands covered in paint and curiosity. Lena stood in the center of it all, guiding them with patience and joy, unable to believe that this was real. Sometimes, she would look up to the glass balcony above, where Elias watched quietly, his expression calm but full of something she had learned to recognize: pride. One afternoon, as the last group of students left, she found him in the studio upstairs, standing by a half-finished canvas. You paint again, she said softly. He smiled faintly. You make it difficult not to. She walked closer, studying the painting. It was a view of the mansion, sunlight streaming through the rain clouds. Her throat tightened. You never stopped seeing beauty, did you? I stopped believing I deserved to see it, he answered, until you knocked on my door. Their eyes met, and for a long moment neither spoke. The air between them felt fragile, like the pause before a confession. Then his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the spell. He glanced at the screen, his expression shifting. A board meeting, he muttered. They think I am wasting company funds on sentiment. Then show them it is not sentiment, Lena said. Show them it is purpose. He looked at her with quiet admiration. You really believe that, do you not? I have to, she said, smiling. You built this place for hope. Let it defend itself. A week later, the boardroom of Crane Industries filled with tension. Executives whispered, papers shuffled. Elias stood at the head of the table, silent until the noise faded. You all know me as a businessman, he began, but for years I forgot why I built anything at all. The gallery is not a loss. It is an investment in people who remind us why we work. A slide appeared on the screen, photos of the gallery, of children painting, of Lena laughing. This is what legacy looks like, he said. The room went silent, and for the first time in years, no one challenged him. When it was over, he drove straight to the gallery. Lena was outside watering the small garden near the entrance. How did it go? She asked. He smiled. They listened. Of course they did, she teased. You are hard to argue with when you finally speak from the heart. He chuckled softly, then grew serious. Lena, I have been thinking. All this time I kept building walls around my life, and you turned one of them into a door. She tilted her head. You are trying to sound poetic, Elias. No, he said quietly. I am trying to be honest. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple silver ring, elegant and unassuming. This is not about wealth or names or headlines, he said. It is about the night you knocked on my door and changed everything. Marry me. For a moment, Lena could not breathe. The streetlight flickered above them, casting soft gold on their faces. Elias, she whispered, her voice trembling. I do not need a ring to know what you mean to me. Then take it as a promise, he said. A reminder that the wrong door can still lead to the right life. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Around them, the city hummed, unaware of the quiet miracle unfolding on that sidewalk. Later, at the gallery's anniversary, the children ran through the halls, laughter echoing against the glass walls. In the center stood a new painting titled The Night She Knocked. It showed a girl at a doorway, rain pouring behind her, and a man reaching out from the light inside. Below the frame, a small plaque read, For Lena Hart, who taught me that sometimes the best mistakes lead us home. As the music swelled and applause filled the air, Elias took her hand. To the girl who knocked wrong, he whispered, but stayed right. And beneath the warm lights of their gallery, surrounded by art, laughter, and everything they had built together, she smiled through happy tears, knowing that for the first time in her life, she had found where she truly belonged. Months passed, and life between Lena and Elias began to settle into a rhythm that felt like a quiet melody. Mornings started with coffee in the sunlit kitchen of the mansion that no longer felt cold. and evenings ended with the two of them walking through the garden, where lanterns glowed like fireflies. The gallery flourished, attracting artists and dreamers from across the city. Every time Lena stood before a crowd at an exhibit, she could feel his gaze on her from somewhere nearby, a steady reminder that she was no longer alone. One evening, as autumn painted the trees in gold, Elias found Lena sitting in the gallery after closing. She was staring at a blank canvas, her pencil hovering but not moving. "Art block?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I am afraid that if I draw again it will mean another ending." He walked closer. "Not every ending is loss, Lena. Some are beginnings disguised as goodbyes." She looked up at him, her eyes soft. "You always know what to say." "No," he said. "You just always listen." They stood in silence, the sound of the city drifting faintly through the glass walls. He reached for her hand, the silver ring glinting under the light. "There is something I have been meaning to tell you," he said. "I have been offered a position overseas a project that could expand the Foundation's reach. It would mean being gone for several months." Her heart sank, but she forced a small smile. "That is incredible, Elias. You should do it." "I will not if it means losing what we have built," he said. "You will not," she replied. "You told me once that hope is worth investing in. This is your next investment." He studied her face, the quiet strength there, and nodded slowly. "Will you come with me?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "This gallery, these kids, they need someone here. Go make the world a little kinder, and when you are ready, come home." The word home hung in the air between them. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You are my home, Lena." The weeks before his departure were filled with preparation and promises. On his last night in the city, the staff gathered at the gallery for a small farewell dinner. The laughter was loud, the toasts heartfelt. When the crowd thinned, Lena and Elias stood beneath the painting of "The Night She Knocked." "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "Every second," she said. "I remember the rain, the fear, and how your voice sounded when you said, 'You should not be here.'" He smiled. "I was wrong. You should have been exactly there." The next morning, he left before sunrise. The mansion felt quieter than ever. But it was not an emptiness of grief, it was a silence filled with meaning. Lena poured herself into the gallery, organizing workshops, painting again, and teaching others to find beauty in mistakes. Letters from Elias arrived every week, short, steady, full of warmth. He wrote about the new centers being built, about the lives changed, and always ended with, "I miss your laughter echoing through the halls." One winter evening, as snow began to fall outside, she stood by the same window where she had once found him standing a year ago. She whispered, "I miss you too." Months later, the city woke to a spring morning, glowing with sunlight. The door to the gallery opened, and she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You did not think I would miss the anniversary, did you?" She turned, and there he was, Elias, a little tanned, a little thinner, but the same calm smile in his eyes. She ran to him, and he caught her in his arms. The staff cheered from across the hall as the two of them laughed through tears. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would," he answered. "The world can wait. You cannot." That night, as the city lights shimmered outside, they stood together beneath their painting again. Lena rested her head against his shoulder. "What now?" she whispered. "Now," he said. "We keep building. Doors, bridges, whatever it takes." And for the first time, she realized that the story that began with a wrong door had never really been about chance. It had been about courage, the courage to knock, the courage to stay, and the courage to love even after the storm. As they turned off the gallery lights, the reflection of their hands intertwined glowed faintly on the glass, a quiet promise written not in words, but in the light they had created together. Summer arrived with the sound of laughter and the scent of fresh paint filling the Crane Gallery. A full year had passed since the night Lena knocked on that wrong door, and the city now called her the heart behind the gallery. Elias, back from his months abroad, had resumed his place quietly beside her, no longer the reclusive billionaire, but a man who had finally learned to live in the light. Together, they expanded the Foundation's reach, bringing art and education to neighborhoods that had long been forgotten. Every success, every smile from a child holding a paintbrush, felt like a victory they shared. But even in peace, life found a way to test them. One morning, an urgent message arrived from the Foundation's legal team. A rival corporation had filed a lawsuit, accusing Elias of diverting funds for personal gain. The news spread quickly, and the media swarmed, eager for a scandal. Lena found him standing by the window again, the same way he had stood that first night. "We will fight this," she said firmly. "You did nothing wrong." Elias's expression was calm, but his eyes carried the fatigue of someone who had faced storms before. "Truth takes time," he said, "but time is not always kind." "Then we will not wait for it to be," she replied, gripping his hand. They worked day and night, gathering evidence, speaking to auditors, and reaching out to every person touched by the gallery's programs. Soon, letters began pouring in testimonies from artists, parents, and children whose lives had changed because of what Elias had built. The public opinion shifted. When the case finally went to court, the judge dismissed it within minutes. There had been no misuse of funds, only jealousy and greed behind the false claim. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Elias stepped forward, his voice steady. "We built something honest," he said. "And honesty always stands." The crowd erupted in applause, but he turned first to Lena, who stood just behind him, her eyes shining with pride. "You were right," he said softly. "We did not wait for time to be kind." That evening, they returned to the gallery. The sunset poured golden light through the glass walls as the first anniversary exhibition opened. A new piece hung at the center of the room, titled "The Door." It showed a young woman standing in the rain, reaching toward a glow beyond the frame. Beneath it, the plaque read, "For those brave enough to knock." As the visitors admired the art, Lena stood beside Elias, her fingers laced with his. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," he said, "because that wrong door saved my life." She smiled. "Maybe there are no wrong doors. Maybe some just take longer to open." He laughed quietly, brushing a raindrop that had slipped in through the open window from her cheek. "Then I am glad you were stubborn enough to knock twice." The gallery lights dimmed as music filled the room, and together they stepped into the next chapter of their story, not a fairy tale, but something far better, something real. Autumn came again, soft and golden, wrapping the city in the same warmth that had once brought Lena and Elias together. The Crane Gallery was now known worldwide, but to them, it remained what it had always been, a home built from kindness and second chances. On a quiet Sunday morning, Lena sat at the long oak table in the studio, surrounded by sketches from the children's newest project. She smiled as she read the small notes they had written in colorful markers. "Thank you for teaching us to dream." She was still laughing softly when Elias walked in, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "You look happy," he said. "I am," she replied. "Do you ever think we could have imagined all this?" "Not even close," he said, handing her a mug. "You gave this place its soul, Lena." She shook her head. "We both did." He sat beside her, watching as sunlight caught the strands of her hair. "You know," he said quietly, "the board has been asking about something." "About what?" "About us. They want to sponsor a documentary on how this gallery began. They think our story might inspire people." She raised an eyebrow. "Our story? The night you knocked on the wrong door? The years that followed everything?" he said. "They want the truth?" Lena leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think the world needs to know?" Elias smiled. "Maybe not the world, but the people who still stand in the rain wondering if it is worth knocking, they do." She reached for his hand. "Then let us tell it honestly." Over the following weeks, filmmakers came and went, capturing interviews, footage of the gallery, and quiet moments of their life together. It was strange for Lena to see cameras where once there had been silence, but Elias handled it with the same grace he brought to everything. During one interview, a reporter asked, "Mr. Crane, what was the turning point for you? When did everything change?" Elias looked straight into the lens and said, "The night a stranger refused to give up on finding help. She knocked on the wrong door, and in doing so, opened mine." The clip went viral. Messages poured in from people around the world, teachers, artists, and dreamers who found hope in their story. The gallery's visitor count doubled, but more than that, donations flooded in for new community centers and art programs. One evening, after everyone had left, Lena walked through the gallery alone. The lights were low, the air quiet. She stopped before the original painting, "The Night She Knocked." It had become iconic now, but to her, it was still the memory of that storm, the moment her life had changed. Elias appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "They say that every masterpiece begins with a mistake," he whispered. "Then this," she said, resting her head against him, "must be the best mistake we ever made." He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "To wrong doors and right hearts," he said. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentle and rhythmic, as if the world itself was applauding the love that had turned a single knock into a lifetime of meaning. Years later, the story of Lena Hart and Elias Crane had become something of a legend. People still visited the Crane Gallery not just to see the art, but to feel the spirit that lived within its walls. The world knew them as visionaries, but those closest knew them as two ordinary souls who found each other through an extraordinary twist of fate. On the gallery's 5th anniversary, the air buzzed with celebration. Guests filled the space, lights shimmered across glass and canvas, and children who had once taken their first art lessons there now returned as teachers. In the center of it all stood Lena, her dress a soft shade of ivory, her smile bright but calm. Elias was beside her, older now, silver threading his hair, but his eyes still carried the same quiet fire. As the crowd clinked their glasses, he raised his hand for silence. 5 years ago, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, this building was just walls and windows. Then a stranger knocked on the wrong door, and somehow it became home. Every color on these walls exists because of that night. The room fell silent, and Lena blinked back tears. Elias turned to her and continued, Lena Hart, you once told me that art is truth painted with courage. So tonight, I want to ask you to help me paint one more truth. He reached into his pocket, and a soft gasp rippled through the crowd as he dropped to one knee. We built this place on kindness, second chances, and faith in what we could become. Will you marry me, here, in the same place where our story began? The audience erupted in applause, but Lena barely heard them. Her heart raced, her eyes fixed on the man who had once opened his door to a lost girl in the rain. She laughed through tears. Elias Crane, she said, I thought you already proposed once. That was for the life we were building, he replied with a smile. This is for the forever we are living. She nodded, whispering, yes. 1,000 times yes. The applause swelled as he rose, slipping the ring onto her finger, a simple band that shimmered like morning light on rainwater. Cameras flashed, but for a moment it felt like time had stopped. Later that evening, as the guests departed, they stood alone in the quiet gallery. Outside, rain began to fall softly, almost as if it had returned to witness what it had started. Lena looked up at him and said, Do you ever think about how different everything could have been if I had not knocked? He smiled, brushing a raindrop from her cheek. Then you would have found another door, he said, and I would have spent the rest of my life wishing I had opened mine. They turned off the lights one by one, the reflection of the two of them shimmering faintly in the glass like the last frame of a film. The sign above the entrance glowed in the rain, the Crane Gallery, a place where every mistake can become art. And as they walked out hand in hand into the gentle storm, Lena whispered, The wrong door, the right heart, and the best story I will ever tell.